The Ring is a supernatural horror film directed by Gore Verbinski, and the screenplay was written by Ehren Kruger. This is an American remake of the original Japanese horror movie Ringu, which was released in 1998, by Hideo Nakata, which is based on the 1991 novel by Koji Suzuki. The American adaptation stars Naomi Watts as Rachel Keller, a journalist who happens on a cursed videotape that kills those who watch it within 7 days. The Ring was released in 2002, meaning that it's over 21 years old now. I remember watching this movie when I was 12 years old in the theater. I vividly remember covering up my eyes when the tape was playing, just in case so I won't be cursed by Samara. Now, as an adult who is very interested in horror movies, I revisit this movie every year, and I still love it. I've watched the cursed video countless times now, and I find it deeply fascinating. So I thought I would do a shot-by-shot analysis of the cursed video. So, this video is going to be a spoiler-heavy video, and will only really make sense if you've already seen the movie. So spoiler alert for a movie released over 2 decades ago. The first shot of the cursed video is of the eponymous ring. This is of course what Samara saw at the bottom of the well. After her mother Anna threw her down the well, Samara survived for another 7 days. The only view above her is of the stone cover used to shut the well. Light during the day would stream through the cracks, creating the illusion of a ring. The next shot is of what appears to be churning waves of blood. This seems to be a foreshadow at what will happen to Rachel near the midpoint of the movie, when a horse jumps overboard from the ferry and is soon eviscerated by the boat's propellers. I think the inclusion of this shot is interesting because it's referring and hinting at many things at once. Samara has a deep hatred for horses, and the horse that runs after Rachel reacts aggressively towards her because of Samara's influence. So Samara is able to influence horses with her powers. She drives horses to self-destruction because she hates them. When she was still alive, her adoptive parents, the Morgans, were famous equestrians and horse breeders. It seems like this is where her disdain for horses began. Perhaps her hatred developed after having to stay in close proximity with them, and she might have been jealous of the horses, since her mother Anna loved them so much. The shot of the churning blood from the horse seems to be perhaps one of Samara's manifestations, that she's making these images come true in real life. Or perhaps it also hints at Samara's more clairvoyant powers, where she's seeing things that will happen and including it in her video. Next, there is a shot of a wooden chair in an empty room. The chair is similar to those that would be seen at a school. This seems to be from Samara's own room in the barn. As her behavior and psychological issues increased, her adoptive parents separates her and builds her a room in the loft of a barn to keep her away from them. The inclusion of the shot of the wooden chair seems to be referring to that period in Samara's life. The real chair seems to be placed in front of a television, one of the only few ways she could entertain herself in the loft. This is probably how she came up with the idea to make the cursed videotape. The next few shots are of hair being combed. It starts with a close-up shot, then the shot goes further out, and a woman can be seen combing her hair in a mirror. This is Anna Morgan, Samara's adoptive mother. Anna proceeds to comb her hair, but pauses to look to her side. It then cuts to a scene where there's a replica secondary mirror in which Samara's reflection can be seen. Samara is disheveled and backs away from view into darkness eerily. The shot then cuts back to Anna, who looks lovingly at Samara. This is the first time we see Samara herself in the video. The inclusion of her adoptive mother Anna, who is portrayed doing something so normal and mundane, is such a stark juxtaposition to Samara herself, who backs away from the mirror into darkness. I think the juxtaposition of having such a normal scene of Anna and this eerie scene of Samara hints at Samara's inability to exist in the normal world. This also hints that the two of them have a closeness between them, hinting at love and care that might have been there before the horrors to come. Next, there is a quick scene of a nail with the tip bleeding a drop of blood. This motif of the nail will come up again in the video, so I will save my interpretation for the next time the nail pops up. The next shot is of Samara's adoptive father, Richard Morgan, who stands at the top floor of their farmhouse. He looks down at the viewer from behind a window pane. I believe this is how Samara sees Richard, someone distant and impossible to reach. This is very different from how she chooses to portray Anna. Richard is presented looking down at Samara through a window pane. There's literally a physical distance between them. He looks down at her before turning away from her, signifying their lack of connection. The next scene is of a beautiful cliffside. I'm presuming that this is somewhere close to their house on Moesco Island. There's a fly at the upper right corner, hinting that this beautiful scene hides a foul truth. Interestingly, this fly will also be a reoccurring motif with Rachel, who perceives the fly as being real. Initially, it proves to just be an illusion, but the second time, she notices while she was watching the videotape, when she pauses it, the fly is still moving. She's then able to grab the fly as it transitions from the videotape into the real world, hinting at Samara's use of the videotape as a portal between her world and ours. We then cut to somewhat of a visceral scene, a close-up shot of an open mouth. There's something being pulled out of the mouth, a long rope with accompanying gurgling sounds. I think this shot is another reference of how Samara felt when she was taken to the doctors at the mental institution. Later in the movie, Rachel has a nightmare or a vision sent to her by Samara. She begins to choke while on the phone and begins to pull out what appears to be a hospital sensory strip. These were what Samara was attached to while she was being questioned by the doctors at the institution. I think the inclusion of this scene was to demonstrate or show how Samara felt suffocated by the doctors while being confined at the institution. There's a quick jump to what appears to be a person being suffocated by a plastic bag. This shot is referencing Samara's own demise, when Anna suffocates her with a black plastic bag before tossing her into the well. Anna Morgan, at the end of her rope, decides to kill Samara. All Anna wanted was a daughter, and when she finally gets a daughter in the form of Samara, her life is completely destroyed by Samara's malicious attacks on her psyche and the killings of her horses. Anna wants to be finally rid of Samara, so she takes her to what will someday become the site of Shelter Mountain Inn, presumably under the guise of a vacation, and proceeds with her plan to murder her own daughter. The next shot is of the well closing. This is what Samara may have seen as she looked up from the bottom of the well as her mother closed the well. The tape then cuts quickly to a shot of a tree burning. This tree is seen multiple times in the movie. It is of the tree that was located near the well where Samara was killed. The actual tree is still alive and has not been burnt like the tree depicted in the video. The real tree sits atop a hill, and when the sun begins to set, the light from the tree would hit the red leaves of the tree, creating the illusion of a burning tree. The red tree was one of the last things Samara saw before being pushed into the well. Interestingly, the tree is a Japanese maple tree, perhaps a nod to the original Japanese film. The following shot is of a nail going through a nail. This seems to be of a wordplay. When Samara was trapped in the well, she tried to scale the walls to escape, but the stones would just rip her nails off. This shot seems to be hinting at that. The tape then cuts to a scene that is full of maggots. I think this hints at Samara's own death, as her body rots away in the well. The maggots then turn into people writhing in what appears to be pain, juxtapositioning humans and maggots. Perhaps this is how Samara sees humanity, as a festering cesspool, hinting at her rage and desire to harm others. The next scene seems to jump back to the institution. There's a chair, a table, and a glass of water. This seems to be the doctor's table. When Rachel discovers some recordings of Samara at the institution, the table and the glass of water seen in those videos match the ones in Samara's own tape. A huge centipede crawls from underneath the table, pushing the chair slightly away. I think this is how Samara sees her doctors, as giant monsters who she feared and loathed. The next two scenes seems to be related, because they flash very quickly one to the other, so I'm going to discuss it together. The first one is of a limping goat. Most of its body is obscured by what appears to be the barn, but it does appear to be injured and is limping away. Then it cuts quickly to a close-up of a horse's eye. I mentioned that Samara hated horses, so I think this is a continuation of that theme. Samara seems to really hate the animals on the farm she lived, and she really hated horses, again, because her parents loved them so much. Being forced to live in the barn, in the loft, I'm sure did not endear her to the other animals there either. The video then cuts to another quick shot of the well further closing, before moving to a shot of an open box of fingers. The fingers are moving, twitching, and shaking, and I count 7 fingers in the box. I think this is, again, hinting at Samara's 7 days in the well, so this serves as Samara's own version of a 7-day countdown. Samara survives 7 days at the bottom of a well, so she passes on the same curse to her victims, allowing them to live another 7 days before she kills them. There is then another shot of the burning tree, then back to her being suffocated by the plastic bag, and then it jumps back to Anna fixing her hair in the mirror. Anna looks directly back at someone, presumably Samara. Again, this hints at Samara's attachment to Anna and her longing to be with Anna. It then cuts to a previous shot of her father Richard in the window, but this time Richard is no longer there, hinting at how Samara felt about Richard, always out of reach and far too distant. Then a quick cut to her chair in the room, but this time it's spinning upside down, wildly. I think this is how she felt when she was locked away in the loft. She was probably feeling very cooped up and crazy. After this, there's a shot of a very long wooden ladder. This seems to be a recreation of the real ladder that her parents used to access her loft. To get to Samara's room, the only way up there was to climb up a very long ladder, meaning that there was no way for Samara to climb down once the ladder was taken away by her parents, meaning she was essentially imprisoned in the loft above the barn, adding to her resentment of her parents and the animals in the barn. Speaking of which, the next scene is of horses lying on the beach. This seems to be depicting the day that Samara forced all of her mother's prized horses into the sea. She most likely used her psychic abilities to drive them into a frenzy and let them into the ocean, where they subsequently drowned and washed back ashore. This is one of the major incidents that really broke Anna's heart and led to Anna's own institution and spiraled into despair. Right after this shot of the dead horses, we cut back to the scene on the cliffside, but this time Anna is there, and she leaps off the cliff to her death. Then there's another quick shot back to the ladder. This time it's falling to the ground. I think this shot right after the previous shot of Anna's leap off the cliff signifies that now no one would ever really come to get Samara out of that loft. Anna was the only one who ever wanted Samara, and in return, Samara drove Anna into insanity, misery, and ultimately both their deaths. There's a quick jump back into the well, with the ring now in full form and the ladder hitting the floor. I think this acts as almost like a death knell for the viewers, since Anna is never coming back to get Samara down from the loft, and the well is now fully closed. Viewers will now experience their own end as Samara did. There is no longer escapes or rescues. So this is a finality of Samara's fate. The final shot is then of the well in which Samara died, before ending in static. Of course, if you watch the movie, you know that after the 7 days, Samara then shows her victims the rest of the video, with the scene continuing with her climbing out of the well, then out of the television, before she proceeds to kill those who have watched the cursed tape. And that's the whole tape. My interpretation of the cursed tape is that it is almost a video diary of Samara's life, and really gives a lot of insight into her psyche. She's a truly disturbed person, but still seems to have a deep attachment to her adoptive mother, Anna Morgan. Yet Samara couldn't really help herself from harming Anna, and ultimately it led to both their ends. I think this is an interesting duality that Samara is. In many ways, she's like every other girl, like any other child. She wants her parents to love her, and forms deep attachments to her caretakers, specifically her mother Anna. But there is this disturbed part of her that she wants to inflict pain and violence upon them. She psychologically tortures Anna and Richard, driving them into self-destruction. This duality is within the videotape itself, for the videotape serves two purposes. It gives the viewer a glimpse into Samara's private life and personal thoughts, but it will in turn torture the viewer and ultimately kills them if they don't make copies of the tape. It's almost like Samara wants people to understand and connect with her. We see this with Rachel, where she seems to form some sort of attachment to Samara. But ultimately, Samara's propensity towards malicious intent and harm usually wins. It ultimately doesn't matter if viewers gain insight or empathy towards Samara. Her true nature cannot be changed, and she will always choose chaos and destruction. If you have other things to add to my interpretation, please leave it in the comments section down below. I hope you liked the video, and if you do, you know what to do. This is Hugh, signing off.